Hello, welcome to this video. First of all, I am Fitemaster Ingvar Jóhannesson. I come from Iceland, and well, we haven't made a video in a while, but I thought it's time to change that a little bit at least. And I wanted to do so by looking at an interesting game that I came across in a forum online. So the game I'm going to look at is between two players rated around 1700 online, and we're looking at it from the black side because our hero had the black pieces. It was the caro-kann defense, and we're just going to go quickly through the opening. Takes knight d7, the so-called Karpov variation. Bishop d3 was played here, not the most common move, but a natural move. However, here, after this, bishop takes e4 and knight f6, we have the first moment sort of worthy of our time. White plays queen d3. So my question is, how do you like that move, queen to d3? You know, take your time and pause if you need to think about it. But for me, and the computer agrees, and most strong players will agree, they don't like this move. White is giving up bishop pair for no apparent reason. So a move such as, simply bishop d3, and we have more or less a normal position. But queen d3, black took, and now I also quite liked his next move. We would like to get this bishop out to f5 if we can, and then finish development normally with e6 and get the bishop out, castle. So I played queen d5. So this prepares to play bishop f5, or in case of white taking as he did, we changed the pawn structure, and now we have this so-called Carlsbad pawn structure. Bishop f5, c3, e6. So this is what we call the Carlsbad. We have these pawns here, which line up pretty nicely for black. I'm trying to get the color, well, let's just put the red color. How do we get the green color? Like this? Yeah. Okay, should be other way around, but you get my point. So this is the pawn structure. If we look at it from just a pure pawn structure, this is usually what you get out of the queens. This is the pure pawn structure. We're looking at it from black side here, and this you would normally get from the queen's gambit declined from the white side. So let's have a look at that. Typical opening. We'll just go quickly through the opening. Queen's gambit declined. White takes on d5, plays bishop d5. And we have this pawn structure here, white castles, and we have the same kind of thing with the pawns, but with colors reversed. And in both cases, one of the main plans for white here, and in our the game that we're looking at for black, is the minority attack. So one of the main ideas for white here is to play rook a to b1. The idea is to play b4, if needed a4, then b5. And it's called a minority attack because you have basically these two pawns. I thought I had green under control, but clearly I don't. Okay, you have these two pawns attacking these three. And the aim of this is to create some weaknesses. If we go back to this, now we have same pawn structure but with colors reversed. I'm gonna reverse the colors. This is the same structure, and we go for the same plan. We don't have any minor pieces on. We could add some rooks, for instance. And sometimes we have other pieces. But the main idea for black is to play for this minority attack. Play b5 at some stage. Try to play b4. And before we do that, perhaps we'd like to get the rooks across over to the queen side. Let's say. White just makes some moves here. Play rook c8, and maybe he brings the king. And we play this, and okay, he goes for something on the king side. And eventually the plan with the minority attack is to pressure on the queen side. Perhaps play b4 here. We could play a5 first. Could make luft, there's no rush. But as you can see, one of two things will happen. Either we take on c3. Let's say he plays rook c1, we take on c3. And let's say he takes with a pawn. Now we have a target here on c3. The rook is lined up here, we can swing the other rook across, put some pressure, and we have this minority attack. The other thing that can happen is white takes, we take with the rook, and now we have this pressure. And we can imagine that, well, white protects. Maybe you play this, b3, and now it would have been good to have already played a5, because now we can go for this, a4, and once again we will transform the position, and now we have some further pressure, a weak pawn here, another weak pawn here. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to pressure these weaknesses. This is a very simplified. Usually we have other pieces which will change the picture a bit, but this is what we mean with minority attack. Now let's go back to the game. Let's switch over to our hero. So we have this pawn structure. Bishop f4 by white here. Bishop e7. And now knight e5 by white. So the main plan for black is to, at some stage, usually castle and then play for this pawn push here, try to create the weaknesses to attack. However, circumstances now with the queens off dictate that we can take some liberties, and one of them would have been to play the move that the computer suggests, which is g5. And this is to gain space. g5, the bishop has to move. Could go to g3 or h5. Probably most people will be more comfortable with bishop to e3, because h5 is coming anyway. And here black is quite fine with pushing f6, pushing the knight away, playing king d7 or king f7, and then, you know, getting along with the plan, putting the rooks here, going for the minority attack. We can, for instance, imagine white, okay, he wants to stop us from gaining space, plays f4, but now we can close it up with g4. We have a monster bishop here on f5, on a very strong diagonal, unopposed totally. And then we can push at some stage f6. Again, bring the king maybe here, and then go for this plan. So g5 would have given us the chance to get an even better version of the minority attack. Instead, our hero in the game played castles, which is, I mean, a fine move if you're not familiar with these ideas. However, another idea was to simply play h6 right away to give the bishop a square here. I will go over that a bit later. So perhaps it was already time to do that. I think g5 is the best move. h6 perhaps second best, and castles might be a slight mistake, because now white did play h3, but it could have perhaps played g4 right away. However, after h3 we have the move rook a to c8 by black, which I don't like for two reasons. Number one is that we're going for this plan, right? So maybe it's even this rook that belongs on c8. Then we can push the pawns and maybe swing the rook, the other rook, maybe over to b7 to put it on the b file. Or if the knight has gone away, we can swing it to a6 and then to c6, depending on what's going on. But here, I think it's very important for white, for black, to keep this bishop, to play the move h7 to h6. And now you're ready to meet g4 with bishop h7. And now you have this very strong bishop, which will help you tremendously when we go for this plan that we talked about so much, b5, a5, b4. It will make the minority attack that much stronger. And we can also at some stage push the knight away, play king f7 to protect this weakness, and then get the rooks over, push the pawns. It's a very good position for black. So rook a to c8 gives white the option to chop off the bishop here, which it does. So now I would say Black went from probably a nice advantage to a very small one, or even a position that's close to being equal. I would prefer black just because of this minority attack. It's easier to play. Here b5 was played. I mean, computer doesn't like it, but I don't think it's a big deal. We're most likely playing this move anyway. We can play a move like g5. And the idea here is simply, it's sort of just a small space gain. And we're kind of anticipating white going f4 at some stage. If we stay back and go for this plan that we did in the game, maybe at some stage white can even play rook here, put the bishop back somewhere, and play for f4, f5. When we have to move this bishop, and all of a sudden white is creating counterplay. So g5 sort of gains space and goes against this counterplay, because on f4 we just chop it off. We take here. Okay. So g5 I like. For some reason the computer likes a5. I'm not so sure. That's great because I can go a4. I mean, we still go for at some stage we have to prepare it, but at some stage we go for b5 and put a rook somewhere on the b file and put pressure here. But I think b5 is the more thematic move, even though the computer does not like it. Rook a to c1. Our hero went on with the minority attack, but I think it's better to prepare it a little bit more and bring both the rooks over, play a5 at some stage, and yeah, just be ready with pressure on either both rooks on the c file with pressure, or one rook on the b file ready to take with a rook on b4. So I think b4 is premature. Let's say a move like rook here, even here. Let's say rook here. We could even start with g5. Doesn't really matter. g5 also puts a question to this bishop. I mean, does he want to... he kind of wants to stay here to protect this square. So if he goes here, and it's already helping us, we play this. White doesn't really have, you know, any great plans. Let's say he goes here. We take it. Let's say he goes bishop takes. He wants to get this square, but now we double. And we see that white doesn't really have any great counterplay. We're kind of ready for b4 quite soon. Let's say he just brings the king or something. We play a5. And you know, white has to be careful. Personally, I would probably like putting one rook on the b file. Let's say he brings the king. We go here. And it's probably a good idea actually for white to do something like this. But let's say he doesn't do anything like that and goes here. But now we can play b4. And if he takes, we can maybe take this. And now already we have this double attack winning material. So white would have to be a little bit more careful, but such is life. Maybe there are some details that he could play this, and we have to be careful because rook comes here. But we take this with check. So I mean, the general idea is to create the weaknesses. Sometimes we have to be, you know, a little bit careful. Maybe we have to play some moves to prepare the breakthrough, but I just want to demonstrate sort of the ideas. So this is just, you know, ideas from the top of my head. Basically, I'm not really using the computer too much here, so you know, maybe I will make some tactical mistakes, but I think the important thing is the ideas. So okay, black plays b4, which is, I mean, not a bad move, but I think it's better to prepare it and be ready, like I said, with a5. And maybe when you take with the rook on b4, like we said earlier when we looked at this sort of skeleton, when we had this, going back to this little study that we had here with rook takes b4. In case of white going b3 at some stage, we have this idea a5, a4, trying to put pressure. So let's go back. So b4 was played, and that sort of concludes our interest in this minority attack business. But let's finish the game nonetheless. White is now kind of escaping from the pressure. There's no real weakness for us to attack. I mean, this is a little bit of a weak pawn, but it's hard to attack it and it's easy to defend. So we're not really gaining much. And after bishop f6, the advantage should actually have gone over to white, because he has this nice rerouting of his bishop with bishop d6. And let's see, we move the rook, captures, and bishop c5, protecting, attacking. And now all of a sudden the pawns are a strength, not a weakness. We can use these pawns to push them baby, and try to create a pass pawn. So the advantage has gone over to white. But in the game kind of fizzled out to a rook ending where material is equal. Finally this g5 push. Now it's kind of doesn't really make much of a difference. Most likely these pawns are going to get traded off, but first black goes for like last kind of trick, f6, f5, and white completely falls for it, king g3. A nice move by black, now rook a2. And here white, well, perhaps eager to trade off his pawn with b5, falls for the only trick in the position, f4 checkmate. Okay, I mean, a nice win, but I think the lessons were in the middle game, early middle game, and in the minority attack, and especially before the minority attack, it was very important to identify that the bishop should be kept. If we go back to this rook a c8 move, here I'm going to say this is a bad move. We really want to play h6 to keep this wonderful bishop on this diagonal, and it would help us tremendously to have this bishop bearing down. And imagine playing for this minority attack with this bishop helping, taking away all these squares from the white rooks. So yeah, I hope that was something that you found useful, and I'll try to get more back into the video business. Not much else to do these days, so hopefully we get around to it, and I see you around. Thank you. Bye bye.